Hello then, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen. This is L24 News World program, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is in Algeria to strengthen ties of integral cooperation between his country and Algeria. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ramtana Mamra, received Wednesday the British Minister of State, Tariq Mahmoud Ahmed. The two had a very fruitful talks to strengthen cooperation between the two countries. Russia continues its advancements in the eastern region of Ukraine as part of its military operation in the country. Families of victims and survivors of gang killings testified before a committee of the House of Representatives in Washington following several deadly shootings across the country. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's top stories. Starting from the main news for today, Spain's foreign minister said that he regrets Algeria's decision Wednesday to immediately suspend a two-decade-old friendship and cooperation treaty with his country.
الشيء اللي قامت به إسبانيا غير مقبول أخلاقيا وتاريخيا.
Algeria is immediately suspending a two-decade-old friendship treaty with Spain after Madrid reversed decades of neutrality in the Western Sahara dispute. The president's office said in a statement on Wednesday that Algeria has decided to immediately suspend the treaty of friendship, good neighborliness and cooperation signed with Madrid in 2002. Madrid and Algiers had signed a deal in 2002 to promote dialogue and cooperation on political, economic, financial, education and defense issues. Algeria's Banking Association issued a statement telling banks that import goods and services from Spain to stop doing so because the treaty was suspended. Spain's government said it regretted Algeria's decision and reaffirmed its commitment to the friendship treaty. The Spanish government regards Algeria as a friendly neighbor country and restates its complete readiness to keep and develop the special cooperation relationship between our two countries to the benefit of the people of both, a Spanish Foreign Ministry statement said.
This
will have important economic consequences. First, for our companies, which have good commercial relations with their Algerian counterparts. And second, it'll have an impact in respect to the general interest and the bill we pay. We are talking about something very important, which is gas import. This will have a big impact on the bill.
Algeria's move came in retaliation after Spain in March publicly recognized Morocco's autonomy plan for the disputed territory of Western Sahara, helping end a year-long diplomatic spat between the two kingdoms. But Algeria said Wednesday that Spain's move had been in violation of its legal, moral and political obligations towards the territory. That reflects the complex challenge Madrid faces in balancing its ties with both states. It's worth recalling that Algeria is a key gas supplier to Spain and is expected to review prices for any new gas contract with Spanish firms. The Algerian government is a reliable partner and has given Spain guarantees at the highest level regarding its gas supply. Foreign Minister José Manuel Alvarez told reporters when asked if Algeria could now adopt measures against Spain involving gas and migration issues.
In the same line of the Algerian matters, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Mr. Ramtana Mamra, received Wednesday the British Minister of State, Tariq Mahmoud Ahmed. The British Minister of State for Foreign Affairs in charge of South and Central Asia and North Africa confirmed that he had very fruitful talks with La Mamra to strengthen cooperation between the two countries.
Getting younger and younger. The House of Lords, where I'm still counted as a reasonably younger member. And, good evening. It's my real pleasure to be visiting my dear friend, the Foreign Minister. He and I have known each other over many years, but I return to Algiers today as not in my previous capacity, but in my enhanced, and I'm very much looking forward to practical capacity as also the Minister of State for the United Kingdom, responsible for our relations for North Africa. And our partnership between our two countries is steeped in history. It's enriched through our people-to-people links, and also the common commitments we have on shared common objectives, such as those of education, bringing communities, different faiths together, but importantly also working together on some of the practical challenges that the world is facing today. We've had a very productive conversation on a range of bilateral issues on how we strengthen our cooperation, but also looking wider across the region and indeed globally on how we can work together more closely. And as a friend and a partner, it's important to listen to each other, to share perspectives. And I very much welcome the Foreign Minister's wide insights, but also depth and experience on some of the issues we've discussed today. So thank you once again, Foreign Minister, for a very warm welcome. And it's a pleasure to be back in Algeria once again.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has arrived in Algeria today to strengthen ties of integral cooperation between both countries. This visit comes after Maduro abandoned the U.S. Summit of Americas in Los Angeles and headed to Turkey, where he launched a strong appeal to Ankara for Turkish investors by promoting the many resources of its country, including oil, gas and gold. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has signed with his Venezuelan counterpart numerous trade agreements relating to tourism, agriculture and banking exchanges.
Es el momento, le he dicho al presidente, le he dicho a los...
He ran into the windows of perfume store, and then he started running down the street, and then we could stop him. He's well-built, shaven man, with no beard or anything. There were a lot of wounded in perfume's shop over there. There was someone on the floor who had been thrown several meters into the air.
There is a great potential for cooperation between Venezuela and our country in many areas, especially in trade, energy, mining, contracts, health, agriculture and tourism.
Always in the African continent, talks aiming at ending Sudan's ongoing political deadlock began Wednesday. The United Nations said although the country's main pro-democracy alliance is boycotting them over a continued police crackdown on those protesting last October's military coup, the joint peace effort is brokered by the United Nations Political Mission in Sudan, the African Union and the 8-nation East African Regional Group Intergovernmental Authority in Development.
We, as a trilateral mechanism, have more than once asked to create a conducive environment for these talks. And we have seen movement. We have seen the authorities lift the status of emergency, and we have seen the authorities release many detainees. We still think that more can be done, but it is important not to let this moment slip, not to let this opportunity slip.
Supporters of the main Senegalese opponent, Ousmane Sonko, are gathered to demonstrate against the rejection of the list in the upcoming legislative elections. The coalition of Ousmane, Yawi Askanwi, had announced this rally against the power before the decision of the Constitutional Council to confirm the rejection of the list to which he and other opposition figures appears for the general election on the 31st of July. This invalidation amounts to removing Ousmane Sonko from the race. Belgium's King Philip on Wednesday expressed his deepest regrets for his nation's abuses in its former colony, the Democratic Republic of Congo. During a speech on his first official trip to the country, he said that Belgian colonial rule had been unjustifiable and racist. His speech came 2 years after he made similar comments on the 60th anniversary of Congo's independence.
Écrivons ce nouveau chapitre ensemble.
Let us write this new chapter together without forgetting the past, but by assuming it fully, in order to transmit to the new generation a thoughtful and peaceful memory of our common history. Although many Belgians were sincerely committed to loving the Congo and its people deeply, the colonial regime as such was based on exploitation and domination. This regime was that of an unequal relationship, in itself unjustifiable. marked by paternalism, discrimination, and racism.
The conflict in Ukraine and COVID-19 brought worse economic news on Wednesday, with the Paris-based Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development slashing its global growth estimate and forecasting increased inflation. The poorest individuals and countries may bear the brunt of consequences. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has followed and lowered its worldwide growth prediction for this year to 3%, down from 4.5% expected only a few months ago. It predicts that growth would decline considerably further in 2023.
Consequently, the economic outlook we are presenting to you today is much more pessimistic than some months ago. Russia's war is indeed imposing a heavy price on the global economy. Global growth will be substantially lower with higher and more persistent inflation. We now project global growth in 2022 at 3%, a downward revision of 1.5 percentage points with respect to our December's projections, with a further slowing in 2023 to 2.8%.
Russia continues its advancement in the eastern region of Ukraine as part of its military operation in the country. The situation is growing worse for Ukrainian civilians who refuse to leave the city as Ukrainian troops started withdrawing as Russian forces threw all their power to take control of the area through heavy shelling and ground advancement to expand their tight grip.
The city of Severodonetsk in the Luhansk region of Ukraine is still living in a severe situation as it's being shelled constantly. The bombardment has taken a terrible toll of the civilians who remain, with many forced into dark basements with severely limited power and disease running rife.
Из-за температуры, потому что он лекарств как-то толком нету. Вот и повыезжало много людей. А сколько людей уже заболели? Да лучше послушайте сегодня ночью. Мы все тут болеем.
I must survive. I don't think about those shellings, bombings, explosions, and so on, so forth. I just have to or even must survive.
Ukrainian civilians, mainly farmers in the eastern region of the country, have been planting seasonal vegetables despite the ongoing fierce fighting surrounding them in the country's east. Residents said they had no plans to leave the town in the face of the Russian military advancement. Most of them stated that they had nowhere else to go, so they continue their lives as usual. Some missiles lie in the fields, evidence of the constant threat the city is under. Residents stated aerial strikes come from all around, but there is little they can do.
I won't go away anywhere from here. It's my field. I won't go anywhere. Why should I go somewhere? There is shelling from everywhere daily. What can we do? We need to live somehow and to survive somehow.
Injured Ukrainian soldiers and civilians were being brought to clinics in a key eastern Ukrainian city of Lysychansk on Wednesday, as fighting continues there. The urban battle for Severodonetsk testified the painstaking, inch-by-inch advance by Russian forces as they close in on control of the entire Luhansk region, one of the two regions that make up the industrial heartland known as the Donbass. Russian forces announced also that several units of the Ukrainian forces are withdrawing from the eastern Ukrainian region as the shelling and advancement continues in the region that is heading to taking full control of it as it threw all its force on it.
According to the updated announcements released on the official website of the Nordic Atlantic Treaty Organization NATO, Secretary General Antonio Stoltenberg, who was originally scheduled to go to Berlin on the 9th of the month to meet with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and German Defense Minister Lomberg, changed the original office meeting to online video talk. Stoltenberg has been diagnosed with shingles and will therefore hold talks scheduled in Germany and Romania only remotely, a NATO office official said on Thursday. As the cost of food soars around the world, the United Nations warns that the war in Ukraine risks aggravating expanding prices and causing a fall on the global food crisis. Lebanon imports 90% of its grain from Ukraine and Russia. However, after the port blast in 2020 that destroyed its primary grain storage, the country only has about 1 month of reserves available. On the other hand, Pakistan suffered from a poor wheat harvest and its government sought grain from abroad. Ukraine covered about 60% of the overall import potential. And in African countries imported 44% of their wheat from Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine alone knew grow enough food for 400 million people, and this crisis makes the African countries living the hardest food crisis ever. The negative consequences worldwide of the Russian invasion of Ukraine are worsening, affecting 1.6 billion people, says United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Today's report makes clear that the war's impact on food security, energy and finance is systemic, severe and speeding up. It is amplifying the consequences of the many other crises the world faces. 3 months into the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we face a new reality. For those on the ground, every day brings new bloodshed and suffering. And for people around the world, the war, together with the other crises, is threatening to unleash an unprecedented wave of hunger and destitution, leaving social and economic chaos in its wake.
Russia says it's ready to guarantee the safety of grain ships leaving Ukrainian ports with the cooperation of Turkey. According to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who was on a state visit to Turkey at a press conference in Ankara and with his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Cavusoglu, Lavrov said that talks aimed at securing the passage of Ukrainian grain exports.
We have explained that grain can be exported freely to its destinations. There are no obstacles from Russia. Only one thing is needed, that is Mr. Zelensky's order, if he can still decide anything, to allow foreign and even Ukrainian ships to enter the Black Sea.
The US questioned on Wednesday whether China and Russia had pushed the no-boundary strategic relationship ahead of global security by voting new UN sanctions against North Korea over its resumption of ballistic missile launches. China says that it has rejected presumptions, statements and charges against its voting position during a right of reply in the General Assembly later on Wednesday. However, the Russian said did not reply to a request for comment on the US statement right away. The United States is hosting the 9th Summit of the Americas this week in Los Angeles. California President Joe Biden insisted on the need to defend democracy and cooperate for more economic prosperity amid controversy and leading state absence. Zara Furjani.
U.S. President Joe Biden has launched the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, California, as Washington seeks to reaffirm management in the region through a number of initiatives aimed at enhancing economies, addressing migration and tackling public health crisis. President Biden assured that democracy was an essential element for the future of the Americas.
As we meet again today, in a moment when democracy is under assault around the world, let us unite again and renew our conviction that democracy is not only the defining feature of American histories, but the essential ingredient to America's futures.
The U.S. leader wants to slow migration to the country, a priority of his administration at this summit. He also unveiled an America's partnership aimed at speeding pandemic recovery and building on existing trade deals.
We'll also come together to launch the Los Angeles Declaration, a groundbreaking integrated new approach to managing migration and sharing responsibility across the hemisphere. And tonight, I'm announcing a new economic partnership that builds on all the work we have done with the region and will guide our engagement going forward. We're calling it America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity.
The event, which has decreased in relevance in recent years, has already been overshadowed by the U.S. decision to exclude Nicaragua, Venezuela and Cuba from the guest list. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel, during a nationally televised speech, criticized the U.S. decision.
The list of the excluded was drawn up. We are honored to be at the top of that list, together with the leaders of Venezuela, Nicaragua, and with you, genuine representatives of our people.
Although the gathering became a snub to Latinos, the Biden administration says the Summit of the Americas is meant to illustrate the country's desire to relaunch and renew the relationship with Latin American countries at a time when China is investing heavily in the region.
Hundreds of thousands of irregular migrants, especially Venezuelans, who intend to reach the United States by traveling through Mexico in a caravan, began receiving safe conduct documents this Wednesday from the authorities and are preparing to continue their advance north the country. The migrants, mostly Venezuelans, many with the entire families, insist on reaching U.S. soil. By these permits ensure that they can stay in Mexico for 30 days without fear of being deported.
This document has a value of 30 days. When immigration stops you on the bus, where do you go? You tell him, it is my original document if you tear it up, and they will ask for money.
Families of victims and survivors of gun killings testified before a committee of the House of Representatives in Washington following several deadly shootings across the country.
A fourth-grade survivor of last month shooting at Texas elementary school told U.S. Senate that she rubbed blood on herself in desperate effort for life after a gunman killed her teacher and classmates.
Hide, and then we went to go hide behind my teacher's desk and behind the backpacks, and then he shot the little window, and then he went to the other classroom, and then he went, there's a door between our classrooms.
Maya and the parents of other young Americans murdered or injured in previous mass shootings appeared before a congressional committee on Wednesday as legislators tried to reach an agreement on gunfire safety package. The meeting by the House Oversight and Reform Committee comes only 2 weeks after 18-year-old shooter killed 19 students and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School in Texas. It was one of a series of mass shootings that have occurred around the United States in recent weeks, killing dozens of people and prompting fresh-round bipartisan negotiations in the United States Senate because Democrats and Republicans are so opposed in guns.
It is high noon in America. Time for every one of us to decide where we stand on the issue of gun violence. Time to decide if it's more important to protect the profits of gun manufacturers or the lives of our children.
Republicans who strongly support the right to keep and bear arms protected by the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution have objected to proposals such as limited sales of assault-style rifles used in Uvalde massacre and another mass shooting at Buffalo, New York, grocery store that killed 10 black victims.
And just now I have got the information that the press conference between the Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune and Maduro of Venezuela are starting this press conference. Let's have a watch.
أقول جمهورية فنزويلا التي نتقاسم معها رصيدا ثريا من العلاقات التاريخية، علاقات طبعها الدفاع عن القضايا العادلة في العالم وعن حقوق الشعوب في الحرية والتنمية.
Bienvenidos en Argelia, delegado en términos de relaciones históricas.
كل هذا بعيدا عن الرواسب الموروثة عن عهد الاستبداد والاستغلال والظلم.
Derecho a aspirar a relaciones internacionales equilibradas y justas, lejos de los residuos heredados de las épocas de la hegemonía, de la explotación y de la injusticia.
فنزويلا والجزائر تشتركان في نضال شعبيهما من أجل الحرية ومناهضة الظلم والاستعمار.
Argelia y Venezuela se extraen intrínsecamente de la historia de la lucha de sus pueblos para la libertad y en contra de la injusticia y de la colonización.
ويجمع بيننا حتى يوم استقلال، نحتفل بالاستقلال. فنزويلا تحتفل باستقلالها يوم 5 جويلية ونحن كذلك.
También nos juntamos en la fecha de independencia nacional, pues Venezuela celebra su Día Nacional el 5 de julio, mismísimo día que Argelia.
لقد تحدثنا عن أمهات القضايا المطروحة حاليا في الساحة الدولية، بدءا بالقضية الفلسطينية، فاتفاقنا تام على أساس كفاح أو النضال من أجل مساعدة الشعب الفلسطيني لبناء دولته الوطنية وعاصمتها القدس الشريف. نفس الشيء بالنسبة للصحراء الغربية، فاتفقنا اتفاق تام على أساس مساعدة الشعب الصحراوي للحصول على استفتاء تقرير مصيره واستقلاله. بالنسبة لليبيا فيه نفس الاتفاق كذلك على أساس سماح للشعب الليبي الشقيق أن يقوم بانتخابات تسمح له بانتخاب مسؤولين جدد لهم شعبية ولهم شرعية شعبية لبناء ليبيا مثل ما يريدونه. بالنسبة للعلاقات الثنائية اتفقنا كذلك على توطيد العلاقات الاقتصادية والثقافية، وإن شاء الله فتح بعد شهرين فتح خط جوي بين كاراكاس والجزائر. هذه بصفة عامة الشيء اللي اتفقنا عليه، وشكرا.
Con el presidente Nicolás aportar al pueblo palestino para construir la construcción de su propio Estado. De igual modo hemos evocado el Sahara Occidental y la ayuda que tenemos que proveer al pueblo saharaui para lograr un referéndum para su autodeterminación. En cuanto al expediente de Libia, hubo también un consenso, una convergencia de los puntos de vista en cuanto a lograr e intentar ayudar a nuestros hermanos libios para proceder a elecciones. Entonces, la organización de elecciones que permitirán la elección de nuevos responsables que gocen de legitimidad popular. Y ha decidido la apertura de una línea aérea entre Argel y Caracas en el mes que viene. Pues eso fue en general lo que tenemos que con el presidente Nicolás.
Bueno, querido presidente, amigo Abdelmajid Tebboune.
Cher président et ami Abdelmajid Tebboune.
Ministros, ministras de Argelia, de Venezuela, embajador.
Ministre de l'Algérie, du Venezuela, chers ambassadeurs.
Hemos tenido una jornada extraordinaria, de verdad extraordinaria.
Nous avons eu aujourd'hui une journée extraordinaire, véritablement extraordinaire.
Hemos conversado ampliamente todos los temas de la geopolítica mundial y de las relaciones entre nuestros dos países.
Nous avons eu l'occasion de passer en revue la géopolitique mondiale ainsi que les rapports entre nos deux pays.
Y puedo decir que nuestros dos países, que son dos países con una historia heroica de lucha, tenemos una visión común hacia un mundo nuevo, un mundo multipolar, un mundo de paz y de cooperación.
Et nous pouvons dire que nos deux pays, qui ont eu une histoire héroïque et de lutte, partagent une même vision. Une même vision sur un monde nouveau, un monde de stabilité et de paix.
Como dice el presidente Tebboune, nosotros hemos coincidido en tres temas claves: Palestina, pueblo saharaui y Libia.
Comme l'a fort bien dit le président Tebboune, nous avons partager et coïncider sur 3 sujets clés: la Palestine, le peuple saharaoui et la Libye.
Hemos ratificado nuestra más firme y amorosa solidaridad con la causa del pueblo palestino.
Nous avons ratifié notre solidarité amoureuse et ferme avec le peuple palestinien.
E incrementar las acciones en nuestras cancillerías para denunciar los crímenes que a diario se cometen contra niños, niñas, mujeres y jóvenes palestinos.
Travailler dans les 2 ministères des Affaires étrangères pour dénoncer les crimes commis tous les jours contre les enfants, les femmes et les hommes en Palestine.
Sobre el tema del Sahara Occidental, le he expresado al presidente la admiración de Venezuela por la firme posición de Argelia en la defensa de los derechos históricos del pueblo saharaui.
Concernant le Sahara occidental, nous avons exprimé notre admiration au président algérien vis-à-vis le peuple du Sahara occidental et sa défense historique en faveur des droits de ce peuple.
El mundo entero tiene que despertar y reaccionar para salir a la protección y al apoyo del pueblo saharaui.
Il faut que le monde tout entier réagisse afin de protéger les droits historiques du peuple saharaoui.
Es tiempo de solidaridad y apoyo del pueblo saharaui.
Il est grand temps d'exprimer davantage la solidarité et l'appui vis-à-vis du peuple saharaoui.
Igual le hemos expresado nuestra preocupación por la situación de Libia.
Nous avons également exprimé notre préoccupation vis-à-vis la situation en Libye.
Consideramos a Libia un pueblo hermano.
La Libye est un peuple frère.
Y aspiramos que más temprano que tarde se den las garantías para hacer unas elecciones donde el pueblo libio pueda ejercer su soberanía.
Et tôt ou tard, nous devons donner les garanties nécessaires pour que le peuple libyen puisse organiser des élections justes qui permettent de rebâtir ce pays.
Y un gobierno surgido de elecciones populares pueda iniciar la reconstrucción de una Libia independiente, soberana y democrática, de verdad, verdad.
Et c'est par le biais d'un gouvernement issu des élections populaires que nous allons avoir une Libye indépendante, souveraine et démocratique.
Sobre los temas bilaterales hemos repasado los temas energéticos, petroleros, gasíferos, los temas agrícolas, los temas de la ciencia, la tecnología, la educación universitaria.
En ce qui concerne les rapports bilatéraux entre les 2 pays, nous avons étudié et analysé les aspects sur l'énergie, le pétrole, le gaz, l'agriculture, la science, la technologie et l'enseignement supérieur.
Hemos decidido construir una poderosa agenda económica, comercial, financiera, de trabajo conjunto, de prosperidad común entre los 2 países.
Et nous avons décidé de bâtir ensemble un agenda de travail en matière économique, financière, de commerce pour mener notre coopération à un niveau plus élevé et atteindre ainsi un progrès conjoint.
Y en ese sentido hemos decidido relanzar la comisión mixta de alto nivel.
C'est ainsi que nous relançons aujourd'hui la commission mixte à très haut niveau.
Para que nuestros equipos de trabajo elaboren ese mapa económico, energético, comercial, financiero, cultural, educativo, de trabajo conjunto y de prosperidad compartida.
Afin que les équipes préparent une carte pour traiter des sujets économiques, financiers, culturels, agricoles, pour bâtir ensemble un chemin de prospérité conjointe.
Nosotros, como lo conversamos, en Venezuela hemos pasado años duros, el año 17, 18, 19, 20.
Le Venezuela a connu des années très difficiles, les années 2017, 18, 19, 20.
víctimas de una agresión imperial contra nuestra sociedad, contra nuestro Estado, contra nuestro pueblo.
Victimes d'une agression impériale contre notre pays, notre société, notre État.
Una guerra económica brutal contra la industria petrolera, contra toda la economía, contra la moneda.
Une guerre brutale contre le secteur pétrolier, le secteur économique, la société tout entière.
Tuvimos que adoptar, presidente, como le expliqué, un esquema de economía de guerra.
Et donc nous avons été forcés d'adopter un système d'économie de guerre, comme je vous le dis.
Economía de resistencia.
Une économie de résistance.
Y hemos paso a paso avanzado hacia un proceso de recuperación de la economía real, de diversificación de la economía.
Et c'est ainsi que petit à petit, nous avons réussi à récupérer l'économie et à créer une diversification de l'économie réelle.
El año 2021 fue el primer año del inicio de una recuperación estable, autosostenida y de crecimiento para los años que están por venir.
Et c'est ainsi qu'en 2021, nous avons commencé une récupération visant la stabilité, une croissance et une stabilité plus soutenable dans le pays.
Vamos hacia la construcción de una nueva economía diversificada, productora de bienes, de servicios, productora de nuevas fuentes de riqueza para nuestro país.
Et nous avançons vers une nouvelle économie plus diversifiée pour créer davantage de biens, de services et une économie renforcée, un marché plus solide.
Y la clave, presidente, como ha sido confiar en la conciencia superior del pueblo.
Et la clé a été avoir confiance dans la conscience solide de notre peuple.
Construir valores de resistencia, de trabajo, de esfuerzo en nuestro pueblo.
Et bâtir des valeurs de travail, de conscience, de ténacité dans notre peuple.
Y estamos saliendo adelante con esfuerzo propio.
Et avec notre propre effort, nous vainquons les difficultés.
Ya este año 2022 se mantiene el ritmo del crecimiento de la economía real.
Et c'est ainsi qu'en 2022, on peut voir comment la croissance de l'économie réelle se maintient.
Es otro mundo ya.
Aujourd'hui, le monde a changé. C'est un
Es
autre
el
monde.
mundo de los que luchan, de los que resisten, de los que creen en el futuro.
C'est le monde de ceux qui luttent, qui résistent et qui croient en l'avenir.
Si me permite, presidente,
Et si vous me permettez, Monsieur le Président,
hemos seguido por Telesur y por los medios de comunicación los esfuerzos que usted ha hecho por la recuperación de Argelia.
nous avons pu suivre par le biais de Telesur et d'autres médias internationaux les efforts que vous avez entrepris pour parvenir à la récupération de l'Algérie.
Por el fortalecimiento de su economía, por el fortalecimiento del Estado, por el fortalecimiento de la democracia y de la sociedad argelina.
Pour le renforcement de l'économie, de l'État, de la démocratie en Algérie.
Y realmente ha sido admirable y quiero aquí, frente a nuestra delegación, felicitarlo por sus esfuerzos y por sus logros.
Et je voudrais dire ici notre admiration et devant ces caméras, vous féliciter du grand succès que vous avez remporté dans vos efforts.
Y estoy seguro que a partir de hoy se inicia una nueva etapa de las relaciones entre los pueblos y gobiernos de Argelia y de Venezuela.
Et je suis certain qu'à partir d'aujourd'hui, une nouvelle ère s'ouvre dans les rapports entre les peuples et les gouvernements de l'Algérie et du Venezuela.
Rumbo hacia la unión y la prosperidad compartida de nuestros dos países.
Et nous allons vers l'union et la prospérité partagée de nos deux pays.
Una gran noticia, presidente, que ha dado usted y que yo quiero ratificar.
Et vous avez donné une grande et très bonne nouvelle et je voudrais la ratifier ici.
Muy pronto los venezolanos, las venezolanas, los argelinos y las argelinas vamos a poder montarnos en un avión y ir a Caracas en un vuelo directo. Montarnos en un avión y venir de Caracas a Argelia en un vuelo directo. Muy pronto vamos a tener la conexión aérea directa del norte de África al norte de Sudamérica, de Argelia a Venezuela.
Très bientôt, entre le Venezuela et l'Algérie, il y aura un vol qui permettra aux Vénézuéliens de se rendre en Algérie et aux Algériens de se rendre à Caracas, c'est-à-dire le nord de l'Amérique du Sud, connecté avec le nord de l'Afrique.
Agradezco mucho esa decisión.
Et je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, de cette décision.
Y la aplaudo.
Et j'applaudis très fort.
Muchísimas gracias. Les agradezco.
As a summary to what Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune has stated, we share a long history with Venezuela. We share the same principles of defending the rights of our people, the people whom they are oppressed with colonialism. Secondly, and we will celebrate the independence of our country in the 5th of July, as well as with Venezuela. On the other hand, we believe also that Palestine, Sahara, Western Sahara, and we stand also with our neighboring country, Libya, for the legislative elections. As well as the main point that was also discussed, we will open a direct airline path with our Venezuelan friends to facilitate the airline paths due to have a shared trust with our colleagues in Caracas. The main point that Mr. Nicolas Maduro also stated that we and the Algerians, we share the same principles and we will have a better future because the world has a new world order. Now moving on to continue our news, and according to local and federal sources, a man with a gun and a knife was held by police early Wednesday near Brout, Mr. Kafangolo, Maryland, home after making threats against the Supreme Court nominee. According to federal prosecutors, Nicholas John Roski, 26 years old, from California, was charged with attempted murder of Supreme Court judge after calling authorities and saying he was experiencing suicidal thoughts and intended to kill a specific justice. Donald Trump and two of his adult children have consented to testify under oath in a civil inquiry of former U.S. President's business activities being conducted by the state of New York, according to an agreement with State Attorney General Letitia James made public on Wednesday. The testimony would begin on July 15 and might go until the following week. A man drove a car into a German school group standing in a popular Berlin shopping district on Wednesday, killing a teacher and injuring many people, including teenagers.
A man drove his car and crashed into a crowd of people in a popular Berlin shopping district on Wednesday. Authorities said the driver killed at least one person and left several others injured.
He ran into the windows of a perfume store, and then he started running down the street, and then we could stop him. He's well-built, shaven man, with no beard or anything. There were a lot of wounded in perfume's shop over there. There was someone on the floor who had been thrown several meters into the air.
The driver was immediately arrested and was being questioned whether he purposely drove into the walkers or it was just an accident, taking into account his mental health.
We are in the process of determining whether this was an international act or traffic accident or even a medical emergency. We also have to deplore the death of a person. The driver of the vehicle could be stopped by passers-by, then immediately by the intervention forces. He is currently being interrogated.
The head of the Berlin police says the car that hit several passers-by in the capital does not look like a political act.
As I said, I wish I didn't say anything about it. At this point, we don't have any relevant evidence that this is a political act, but for now we continue to investigate under high pressure.
Berlin Interior Affairs Minister said evidence suggested the driver was mentally ill On the other hand, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz shared his sympathies with the relatives of the victim and the injured after the incident via his Twitter account. The woman who died has been identified as a school teacher, and 14 children were among the injured who were on a school trip along with their tutor before the car hit them and crashed into a shop.
And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup.
Following a fire that killed at least 44 people, including 10 firemen, and wounded nearly 200 others in Bangladesh, police launched an inquiry against 8 officials from shipping container facility on Wednesday. Firefighters put out the fire at Sitakonda depot, 40 kilometers south of Chittagong, on Wednesday, 4 days after it started late Saturday, causing the sequences.
Intensive rescue operation continues. A storm of mud and rock hit a hotel and flooded its ground and first floor in Argentina. The mudslide had left a tourist dead and 2 others went missing.
Brazilian authorities on Wednesday intensified their search for the British journalist and the Brazilian expert missing since Sunday in Amazon, while a man was arrested in the area, according to the Brazilian press. The federal police and the army are trying to find Dom Phillips, a regular contributor to the daily The Guardian, and Bruno Pereira, a recognized expert on indigenous people, missing in the Javari Valley in the state of Amazonas.
Iran has turned off a number of cameras installed by the global nuclear watchdog after Western powers introduced a resolution to censor it. All the dismantled monitoring systems were installed voluntarily and beyond the framework of the Safeguards Agreement.
British prosecutors said Wednesday they have authorized police to charge ex-film producer Harvey Weinstein with 2 counts of indecent assault against a woman in London, 1996. The Crown Prosecution Service said in a statement that charges have been authorized against Weinstein following a review of evidence gathered by London's Metropolitan Police.
Dozens of activists gathered at Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro on Wednesday in what they called That Hug to mark World Oceans Day. Participants held hands in a large line to embrace the ocean, to draw attention to the incorrect disposal of waste, especially plastic, which damage the oceans. This event took place in the 3 countries, which they are Portugal, Brazil, and United States.
I
think it's very important to bring people together, to realize the problems of having so much plastic rubbish on the beach, which is the place in nature that we have the most contact with, so we don't get used to being surrounded by plastic, by microplastics.
And with this activist work, we come to an end of our news. Thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.